Building rapport with professors and opportunities beyond the classroom.
This is the third time we're recording this video, so hopefully this works out. But hi, it's the MLS and our friends. Today we're going to be talking about how we build rapport with our professors in and outside of class, and how we should engage in opportunities to further our chances of getting into the grad schools we want to, and also just improving our resumes. So without further ado, does anybody want to introduce themselves?
Mariam, hello. I am a third year in the Cognitive Science of Language program, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you, Mariam.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Paige. I also use she, her pronouns, and I'm in my fourth year of Cognitive Science of Language.
Thank you. And I am Audrey. I am also in my third year, but I am in the combined honors program for linguistics and geography. So, in terms of building rapport with your professors in class, how early do you think we should start? I know I have my opinion in terms of how early we should start is probably, like, I think I tried in first year, but in all honesty, I probably only did proper relationship building in second year, when I got to know profs who are actually teaching more particular topics that I was interested in second year. Like, I tried my hardest in first year, but those professors are teaching like classes of like 500 students, so I doubt they'll probably remember your face. What do you guys
You'd be surprised.
Really? That's very impressive.
I remember being in my first year, and particularly specifically sitting in the front of all of my classes so that my professors could remember my face, and I would participate as much as I could, also for the same reason. So they would be like, oh yeah, like her face is familiar. She would always ask questions in class, and I think it worked out. Like, I was recognized by some professors when I tried to go to their office hours. And yeah, so definitely participate in class. Don't be discouraged by the size.
Oh, that's true. But yeah, I mean, I suppose if you sit at the front, I was also one of those front sitting people, but I understand other people might not really want to do that. Paige, were you the same in first year?
Yeah, I sort of sat at the front, but then it kind of by the middle, and I moved up a little bit as the semester went on. But yeah, it's a good way to get to have your professors recognize you, especially once you get into their smaller classes in the upper years. They kind of know your face already.
Oh yeah, for sure. And especially if you get into upper years, you will begin to encounter more tenure profs who are primarily focused on their research here at McMaster, and a small part of, well, not a small, but like a part of their responsibility is teaching, but their also main goal is to maintain a permanent position at the university to do research. So those are usually the professors you want to talk to about getting your lab opportunities, if that's something you're interested in. They usually have their own lab, and they're doing, obviously because they're doing research for the university, versus a different type of professors who are on a teaching track. And those professors are only here on a temporary appointment. They usually sign a contract to teach for a couple of years. And obviously, as the name suggests, wouldn't you know, their primary responsibility is just to teach. So maybe they don't have as much things to offer in terms of like giving you undergraduate research experience, but maybe they have some other resources. So I think that's something you should keep in mind of. Oh yeah, so when you guys were in class, I'm assuming the three of us were like goody two-shoes and we weren't like super wild and didn't do anything silly, but do you have any tips on maintaining student etiquette?
I do. I think that it's important to be engaged in the lecture as much as possible. So whether that means actively taking notes and jotting down questions on the side, if you're not comfortable with asking them in during the class, you could always go to the professor after and then ask. And another great thing for students would be if you were just, well, hopefully when we go back to school, if you're mindful of your own behavior, because sometimes, if you're in a class and people are whispering and you're trying to listen to the lecture, it can get very distracting and very frustrating. For online environments, I would recommend keeping the small talk and chats to a minimum, just because that could also be kind of distracting, unless, of course, you and the person you're privately messaging are both okay with it.
I have another thing to add for the etiquette note. A lot of professors will expect you to have read the syllabus and to not email them with questions about like deadlines or like what's the penalty for submitting something late. Like all of the information is usually stated right there in the first document. So I think that's what I've seen a lot in online classes, is the chats kind of blowing up with, oh, when's this assignment due? But if you just
Yeah.
this right at the beginning, I know that your professors will appreciate it.
Yeah, I think a lot of students miss it because obviously when you come straight out of high school as well, you might be used to your teachers like constantly are enforcing like particular information and trying to tell you it over and over again. So you're not responsible for it. But I think one of the biggest changes when you come into university is that you're responsible for especially the administrative tasks. So a bad sign for professors usually if you are constantly asking them about things that they've already addressed. It just goes to show that you're not really paying attention and you're not being responsible for the material that you should be. So that's a really good point. Yeah, it's also like a little bit of a waste of other students' time if you're asking, you know, questions that are already known versus when they have questions actually about the content that had only recently been discussed in lecture and they have a question about that material because they're very passionate about it. So try not to waste their time, I guess would be a good way to summarize it. So aside from that, we also should discuss a little bit about how to prepare for graduate studies, which is much further down the line than what we've just discussed. What we recently just discussed was like getting to know your profs in class, trying to not be rude and just having good etiquette, but also Paige, I'm sure you have a very good idea because Paige is about to graduate. Woohoo! So she's been spending a lot of time preparing. So Paige, what do you think is a good way to prepare for graduation?
So first off would of course be picking the programs that you're interested in and the schools that you're looking to apply to. I had some programs that I'd been looking to apply to since like high school. And then I had one that I picked just over reading week. So I had less than a month to work on my applications for that, which is kind of my bad, but also kind of exciting. So yeah, first off, start with like picking what schools and what programs you're looking for. And then from there, you usually check out like the websites to see what the application is like. So you typically have to have a couple references. You have to write a letter of intent or some other supporting documents, usually a resume as well. So sort of getting everything that you need together, or at least having like a list of things you know you need to do. And then from there, once you kind of know what you're doing, I would start drafting out what your statements are going to look like, or like the reasons you want to apply to that program or something, so that you can ask your references as early as you can. A lot of professors get a lot of requests to write reference letters, and you want to pick references that know you well, but they might also know a lot of other students well. So you want to make it easy for them to say yes to you. So you're going to give them things like your resume and a draft of your statement, things like that right from the beginning, just so they have a clear idea of who you are and why you deserve their letter. And you should do this, yeah, as early as you can. I think I reached out maybe 2 months before I needed them submitted. And then from there, you work on all of your individual stuff. And if you wanted to ask them for edits or for any advice, you should do that early as well, because they are working very hard to write these letters for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just write your stuff, upload your documents. It's a little bit scary, but it's also really exciting. And professors that you're asking for references know you well, and they'd be willing to give you advice on anything that you really need help with.
Thank you, Paige. I also have something to add about that. I was going to say that people underestimate how much further ahead you have to prepare for graduate school, if that's something you want to look for, want to do in the future, even though it's kind of unfortunate because sometimes you don't really know what you're going to do in your undergraduate career, and you might want to change your stream and like, oh, now it's too late, and it's kind of daunting. So it's unfortunate, but it is something that you'll benefit from if you actually actively prepare, because even if you look at past years, like as a third year student, I'm doing research about what the admission requirements are, and that can really help you plan things you might want to engage with during your undergraduate studies, like outside of just your class time. You might realize that for some universities, if you want to get into a really good school, you need 3 letters of recommendation. That means you need to spend the next 2 years of your life trying to engage with and build relationships with 3 different profs who are probably, hopefully, on tenure track and have research experience. And that's a lot of work, and that's a lot to think about. So I think checking admission requirements is the first stage of scaring yourself into knowing what you need to do. And then then from there, that's a really good way to plan ahead.
Yeah. I would even say I didn't do this myself because I kind of leave things to the last minute sometimes, but even if you could try to start in the summer, because 4th year marks are usually like pretty well looked at by admissions committees. So you're kind of like trying to write all your letters, but you're also trying to do really well in your classes. So if you have time in the summer to start planning or like draft out your letters, maybe I would recommend it.
Oh yeah. Oh, so do you think they focus mostly on your final few years of university marks?
I think the standard is usually like the second half of 2nd year, all of 3rd year, and the first half of 4th year.
Oh.
But they also do take your sub GPA. So I think that kind of like knocks out your 1st year marks, but I'm actually not too sure how it works. But they calculate it for you, so you don't have to like figure it out yourself. But yeah, just do well all around if you can.
Just be a perfect person. It's fine. Like make sure you do everything.
And that's not to say only focus on being a good student for the last half of 2nd year to the end of undergrad. It's very hard to get good marks if you don't build that base in your 1st year, because a lot of that knowledge is applied in your upper year classes.
Yeah, very important.
Very important.
That's so funny. Imagine if you just did like terribly and you like barely passed, and then in 2nd you're like, oh, you know what? It's time to try, and then
yeah. Unfortunately, like I do know of some situations where that has happened, and that's why I think like,
oh no,
you really need to take it very seriously from the get-go. Like, yeah.
Obviously, hopefully not at the expense of your mental health.
No, not at all.
But definitely take it seriously. This is not a joke. You must be responsible. And yeah, and in terms of being responsible, do any of you guys want to contribute to ideas about how to be responsible, about planning ahead with your professors and coordinating with them? Because as Paige said, that's a really important part of planning ahead.
So I do actually. I do have advice for people who have an interest in research or getting involved but don't exactly know where to start. The thing that I would recommend is definitely check out your department, see if they have like a website that offers a summary of all the professors, see if any of the professors have research going on. And then sometimes in your programs or in the department, there'll be labs. So for example, the Department of Linguistics and Languages has the Ariel Center, so applied research in experimental and applied linguistics or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, center of,
we're all in labs. This is terrible. We're really bad students.
I know the acronym, okay? It's Ariel.
That's true.
But anyways, the point is it's a great resource. And even if you don't want to get involved in the lab right away, you can still get involved in the administrative side. They offer, like you can join in coffee times and get to know other graduate students and talk to them about their experiences, or talk to professors that might show up to the coffee time. And then another thing I would say is reach out to your professors early if you do find a professor that you think their research is aligned with your interests. And it's not too early to introduce yourself. You don't have to go in strong, but what I did was I researched the professors that I was interested in and looked at their work, and I emailed them before I went into their class saying, hello, like I will be in your class. I looked into your stuff and I'm interested in possibly joining your lab after the semester, so that you show that initial interest, and then you have the semester to follow it up with good questions and engaging, and then building that relationship with your professors.
Yeah, I thought it was really important that you mentioned that you should do your research beforehand. I think it's a little bit like applying to a job interview. You want to not be silly. So like when you get there, you want to make sure you know what the company you're applying to is about. So you should do the same if you want to get basically any opportunity. Just to have the basic knowledge to know what you're applying for is pretty decent etiquette, I think. So yeah, and also it shows that you know what's going on. You have some sense of awareness. You're being responsible.
It shows initiative.
And you're showing initiative. Yeah, and in terms of initiative, I think a lot of professors actually, aside from just showing that you're a decent student, I don't think you have to be like a super outstanding student to get into their lab. But if you show that you're responsible, you show that you are passionate, you're persistent, and obviously that you're not extremely struggling with the content, it's likely they will notice you to some extent.
And professors love to talk about their research. So another good idea is, if you're trying to like establish rapport with a professor, is just ask them if you don't know about the research. They are more than happy to share. Most of them, from what I've experienced. Yeah.
Paige, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just like I think when you're able to meet them in person, sometimes like going to office hours to ask the questions instead of sending an email might stand out a little bit, because face-to-face conversations, we all miss them now, but
Yes.
they were very valued at one point. And I think it's kind of a different vibe. It's a little bit more chatty than it would be with like a formal email. And it gives them a chance to like recognize you in your classes and stuff. So even virtual office hours, I don't find them to be that bad. It's not scary to go to office hours. Once you've
I think
done
it's
it.
nice. It's like more personable, because you're kind of like in your home, just having a casual conversation with your professor. Like,
exactly. And they get so many emails all the time that like talking in person, you're going to get a faster reply anyway. So it's convenient for you as well.
That's true. Also, I think something that I've been enjoying is that you can be really strict about limiting office hours to one-on-one contact. Mm-hmm. Like they usually like to have like a lobby where people have like a waiting room, and then you bring people in, so that way you don't feel pressure of like other students watching you, which is something I didn't really like about office hours back in the day when we were in real life, because every time I went, there's always someone lining up outside that's probably eavesdropping thing, and it's like, oh my god, what do I ask? Super embarrassing questions.
I would always eavesdrop outside of the class.
Because I would eavesdrop. So then I
think the other students have valuable questions, and I didn't think of those valuable questions. You know, it's
the intent is pure.
Yes.
We're all just learning.
And yeah, all of this like stuff is really important, especially when you get around to the time you're actually asking for a letter of recommendation, because even if you really pressure a professor that you super like, but they don't know you, to write a recommendation letter for you, and they just feel bad and they don't really know you, the assumption is the letter of recommendation will always be positive. So they will always write positive things that they've noticed that you're able to complete. But I remember this is something Dr. Kucherova talks about a lot. She uses an example. It's like they could be saying something positive, but it's not about what is said, it's about what isn't said on the recommendation letter. So if they write things like, oh, this person has very good handwriting and they finish all their assignments, it could also mean because they're writing this because this person doesn't really participate in class otherwise. There's not really any outstanding attribute of their character that they've displayed in a classroom environment, which the professor can write about. So this is important, like even if they're going to write a nice, pretty, superficially pretty recommendation letter, it could not have a lot of substance, and the person who's reviewing the letter will most likely know. And as well as not the only letter you have to acquire, unfortunately, you have to also write your own letter of intent if you were to go into graduate studies often, which is very scary. And a lot of us have to ponder for months on what to do. And that's the thing, like it could take weeks or months to write something really high quality or like to the best of your ability. So please don't think about it a week before the deadline. By then it's too late. You know what? Just wait another year. Take a gap year and come back to it because you probably have a better shot then. You need to plan ahead. You also need to make sure you show your professors your letter of intent to show that you're serious about it. You know, if you are taking it seriously, you would be able to show that by obviously planning ahead and also writing something really good, which takes time, right? So in terms of, oh yes, and also cold emailing is something that you can do if you're terrified of real life contact. I know Mariam has, correct?
Experience cold emailing. Yeah. So I actually cold emailed a couple of people. So when I was in the summer of my first year going into second year, I was trying to look for SLP opportunities, speech language pathology volunteer opportunities, because a lot of the SLP grad schools require a certain amount of volunteer hours in clinic. So what I did was I cold emailed all of the SLPs that I could find in Hamilton. And you know what? I even emailed, I believe it was like an SLP instructor at like the McMaster grad school, like SLP grad school. And like, she was very kind. It was definitely like poorly thought out on my part because like I didn't do too much research on her, but she was like, I'm just a teaching instructor, but you can look at other clinicians to like volunteer with. And she was very friendly. So that was a fun cold emailing experience. And I actually ended up getting a couple of positions from that. I would definitely recommend establishing rapport over cold emailing, but you know, sometimes you have to do what you have to do.
Paige, have you had any experience cold emailing, or did you get your opportunities purely based on making relationships?
For volunteering, or are you thinking of a specific thing, or just like a general?
No, just in general, beyond like class time.
I definitely have cold emailed before. Usually it hasn't worked out very well for me because I don't really remember the time when I just randomly sent an email and they were like, yeah, sure, you can come like work for me or volunteer. But it is a good way to get things. Like if they're like, yeah, sure, like I'm looking for volunteers or I'm looking for someone to like work this job, that's totally cool. But I haven't had much success with it. I'm a fan of building rapport first.
Me too. I think we're all a fan of like preferring to build rapport because it's just more organic that way and it's not as awkward. But yeah, I definitely have cold emailed professors too. None of them have worked out. So that's like 2 out of 3 of us who have not experienced something. But if that's something that you feel more comfortable doing, you should go for it because it might yield results. And especially for volunteering opportunities beyond so you can do this with your professors, and I think it's less likely for that and more likely if you were doing other things. for your SLP program. Sorry, I'm so uneducated about what you guys need to prepare for, because I haven't had to do any of this. But yeah, and
I think most programs require some sort of like well, I think at least most rehabilitation programs do. So like I think physiotherapy and like occupational therapy also require some sort of like clinical exposure before like applying. I don't know if it's required or if it's just preferred, but depending on your program of interest, then you would do the research for the grad schools of that field.
oh, okay. Thank you very much. That was very informative. And since we are on the topic of talking about getting opportunities beyond class time, I know that we are all part of different labs. So I did want to make sure that today we talked about types of opportunities we might have encountered in terms of labs, whether we've missed some stuff that we're upset about, what we're currently part of, obviously. Yeah, and just like anything you know of that's like happening around school. So maybe some students who are interested might be able to participate. So who wants to start?
I could start. Yeah, so opportunities, or sorry, lab positions that I'm in right now. I'm currently doing a research practicum under the supervision of Dr. Daniel Papa. He is the phonetics and phonology grad school teacher, and he's also the phonetics teacher for undergrad. He also teaches subjects like forensic linguistics for those who are interested more in criminology, and anatomy and physiology for speech and hearing.
I'm so upset I didn't get into that. I couldn't.
It's really interesting.
I wanted to take it.
It's okay. I'll let you borrow my textbook.
Thank you.
But yeah, so and then I had actually started volunteering last year with Dr. Victor Cooperman, who is the research methods professor. And yeah, so I had gone into one of his experiments, and it was Paige actually, who was the research assistant. And I had asked her like, oh, like I'm really interested in volunteering, specifically with Dr. Cooperman. And she said that this is what she did. She emailed and she asked to attend lab meetings, and that's what I did. So then I eventually like kept emailing and like asking if there were openings in his lab. I also emailed him prior to entering the research methods class. He was the professor. I was like, oh, like, hey, I'm going to be in your class. I'm really interested in this. I have looked into your work and I hope I can join after the semester. And yeah, so those are the two labs that I'm currently a part of. I'm also a part of the aerial operations team, which is our research center for linguistics and languages. And yeah, I'm one of their learning series coordinators. So it's more administrative stuff in the operations team. So yeah.
Yeah, what are the specific tasks that you do most often in your lab? Because I know we all do like pretty different things from my understanding.
So like, for Dr. Papa's class, I've been, Dr. Papa's lab, I've been exploring some PsychoPy to create experiments online now that everything has shifted from being in person to on our computers. And then for Dr. Cooperman, it's kind of a mix. I'm sure Paige can add on to this as well, because we're both in his lab. Yeah, go ahead, Paige.
Yeah, well, in other years, it was mostly like running experiments that I did at least. So like we focus on eye tracking for a lot of the experiments in Dr. Cooperman's lab. So like setting up the eye tracker and having participants come in and like doing the actual like experiment running, and then some like data editing, and now that we're online, a lot of like video editing, things like that, and attending lab meetings, of course. Yeah, that was mostly my experience. I haven't worked on any of my own projects. I would have liked to, but I didn't start thinking about it early enough. So yeah, if you're interested in doing like a fourth year thesis, look into it sooner than later, just so you know, like the same as grad school, so you know what you need to have ready and the deadlines and everything.
For those of you who don't know, a research practicum is something that you can do in your, I think it's usually your third year, and you find a professor that you can work with, and you come up with a project together, or you assist on their project, and you essentially get credit for research assisting. That's something that you also have to prepare a letter of intent for, I believe, and contact your professor early. And then the thesis is more focused on creating your own project and running that over, I think it's not one semester, but 2 semesters. That's the difference between like the practicum and
I think
the
you could do a
thesis.
2-semester practicum.
Yeah, but it's like split up. You only get like,
Yeah, it's like 3 credits over a year or over 1 semester.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, Paige, did you do the practicum then?
Yeah, I did. I joined the lab after research methods as well, so in the 2nd semester of my 2nd year. And I was just looking to like get some lab experience, learn a bit more about like research. And so I was just volunteering for the most part. And then I worked over the summer in the lab. And then in 3rd year, I did the practicum. And it was, I did a little bit more like learning about like data analysis during that, but I didn't take on any like of my own personal research. But I really liked it. It was a good course. And then you do like a little reflection at the end and everything. I would recommend it, especially if that's going to be like your first opportunity to try and get into the lab. Because I think a lot of professors are willing to take on like undergrad students who want to learn about their research and about research in general. They're really like happy to have you join them and to learn about what they're doing.
Yeah, research profs love talking about their research. Well, it's their baby, so
It is.
I totally understand. Well, yeah, I wasn't in Dr. Hooverman's lab as these two were, but I got invited by Dr. Kucherova at the end of her 2nd year syntax course to be a part of her lab, and I have missed several opportunities in terms of like applying to labs or like trying to get into different people's labs. I've also tried to get into Dr. Papa's lab earlier in 2nd year, but that didn't really fall through. I think it was mostly due to like some lack of communication. Like sometimes I would send emails and they wouldn't get read. And obviously it's not Dr. Papa's fault. It's just sometimes emails get lost. And so I didn't really hear back. So that was mostly the reason why. I've tried to apply to labs for geography, which is unrelated, but that was more of a cold email. And I think sometimes timing is really important. Sometimes professors just don't have spots open depending on the semester or whether or not they're having any important projects going on where they're at a point where they can invite undergraduate students to help them. Sometimes professors are about to go on their break to do research. So if you're on tenure track, I'm pretty sure every 7 years you have to take a leave of teaching or you are alleviated from some teaching responsibilities so you can focus on completing more of your research. So if that's the case, you might not be able to see them as much. So I think there are a lot of factors in terms of getting in. So I have missed some, but luckily I did get into a lab, which is really nice. And it also happened accidentally, in my opinion, because I didn't really put in the effort of sending out an application or anything to get in, right? So,
but Audrey did put in the effort of being a very bright student in that class.
I tried in class.
Visible enough for
if it makes anyone feel better for that class, I'm pretty sure I like failed the midterm, and I'm still in her.
We all failed that midterm, but
That's
it's okay.
True,
we don't need to scare the
prospective watchers of this.
Yes,
video
it's a
today.
mystery class that we will not mention.
But I think I might have accidentally mentioned. But in any case, it still got in. And my research, Dr. Kucherova really likes for students to be very involved themselves and for it to be a very student-driven environment. So she wants all of us to be doing our own projects at the same time, which are slightly related to her stuff. That's, I think, her preference. So a lot of my research, which I can say is my research now because she wants it to make it my research, is building off of her research on internal nominal structure. I won't get into it. That's too boring. But I do syntax morphology stuff. I'm doing some research on language Hamar right now, and she wants me to submit some applications for external opportunities as well. I know I'm going probably to apply to an undergraduate conference soon, which is really scary, but she wants me to do that, so I guess I'll do it.
Very exciting.
Very exciting, terrifying. I know Mariam is also applying to the undergraduate student research award thing, and I'm also doing that, so me may or may not get it, but we're going to try anyways. That's how I guess most of the stuff is. But yeah, I guess that's what I've been doing in our labs. So before we run out of time, because I know time is ticking, I know you guys have probably had volunteering opportunities. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Paige, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I had a really hard time finding volunteer positions in second and third year. I didn't really look in first year because I wasn't ready to branch out and look into volunteering after just starting first year. But going back, I probably would have, because I did not have a great time trying to apply to all these different ones and then never hearing back. So I guess it's sort of like cold emailing, but it's more like an application on their websites. And then the ones I did hear back from, of course, just didn't end up working out. I applied for one that was in Burlington, and it would have taken me an hour to bus there for a 2-hour volunteering thing, and I just didn't have the time or a car to get there.
I think I volunteered that one in Burlington that you're talking about.
Oh, really? It sounded really great, and I was really
small world.
It just did not work out for me. I was oh yeah, I don't have class on whatever day of the week, I can come, but then I didn't realize how big of a commitment it was going to be, and
yeah,
I couldn't take it on. So I actually have a remote position this year that I got through the Linguistics Society. So it's working one-on-one with a child who has ASD, and her aunt is a speech pathologist who reached
cool.
So it's really nice to have a remote position, and it's really cool to build this one-on-one connection. But I know a lot of organizations aren't really asking for volunteers this year since there's none really in person. So at least for this round of grad applications, we did not require clinical references or volunteer hours.
Wow, okay.
So there was a chance you can explain the experience you do have, and of course it's sort of just a bonus at this point, because they didn't want people to be going out trying to find volunteer positions that would increase the spread of
course. Yeah,
it was pretty nice of them to do that, but yeah, I think it's really hard to find a volunteer position, but once you get one, I think you're kind of set, and you just have to build a good relationship with your supervisor and ask them for a letter if you can.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I kind of did the same thing I said before. I cold emailed a bunch of SLPs at first, and like Paige, I had a really hard time finding positions because everyone was doing the same thing. So I started in the first semester of my second year, and I found a position, I think, after a month of rigorous research and emailing. And so the first one was here in Hamilton, which the president of the MLS actually also volunteered at. It's called Building Blocks Speech Pathology. And we sent in our resumes and our transcripts, and we went in for an interview, and they asked us if we had any experience in the field. It was very new to me because I didn't have much experience with children, but they were still very friendly and at first you go in, you kind of have to like prove yourself. You're not going to just volunteer with the children or like the clients right away.
Immediately, just as soon as you arrive, they're like,
Yeah.
here, you are great, just do it.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to do kind of like the administration stuff. So whether it's like pulling and sorting files or getting clinician notes ready, it's kind of just like the backstage stuff that you're doing. But I know that eventually Torin, the president again, he managed to get a really great opportunity with volunteering one-on-one with a child, and he would just work with that child over and over, which was a wonderful opportunity for him to establish that rapport, not only with the SLP, but also with the individual child.
Yeah, so you can get pretty far depending
You
on
can.
how you make use of your resource and everything. And so we could go more into this, but in the interest of time, I just want to make a final comment to say that obviously everybody, all of us here today, had very variable experiences. So depending on timing, the profs that are available, opportunities are available, how much competition you have, you might have very different experiences trying to build your resume or seeking opportunities. Obviously, there are some things you can do that will improve your chances. So just try to manage the things you can be in control of as a student. I wanted to thank everyone who has come today. It was very helpful. It was a very nice, fun chat. And if you haven't already, check out our social media for McMaster Linguistics Society. Our Instagram is just at MacLing Society, and our Facebook is at McMaster Linguistics Society, 3 separate words. So yeah, I hope you guys found that helpful. Let us know if you enjoyed this very much. If you did and this was super helpful, then we will consider doing this again, maybe. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Good to chat with you.
Thanks for watching. Check out our YouTube channel for more symposium content, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook.